She doesn't belong here." That's what my sister whispered, right before I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the velvet pouch, and handed the estate attorney a flash drive. Moments later, my grandfather's face lit up the screen, and his voice filled the room. "Jenna is my sole heir." "Hi, I'm Jenna." I was always the quiet one, the afterthought, the girl in the corner chair with the paper plate. But that day, I didn't raise my voice. I let the will speak for me. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to get to know you a little better. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. That way I can send you a special shout out. Now let's begin our story together. They always saved me the corner seat. Not out of kindness, but so I'd be easier to overlook. It was the one nearest the folding card table stacked with paper plates, farthest from the stories and the laughter that always seemed just out of reach. The late summer air clung to my skin as I stepped into the backyard of my parents' home in Charleston. The same setup as every year, tiki torches flickering in the corners, overcooked ribs smoldering on the grill, and red and white checkered tablecloths trying their best to cover the wobble in every table leg. Elaine's voice rang out before I even made it past the gate. "Well, look who still owns that navy dress." I looked down, ran my fingers along the faded fabric at my hip, and forced a smile. Still fits. Elaine, in a pale green sundress and espadrilles, gave a little smirk, glancing around like she was waiting for applause. A few chuckles floated over from our aunts. I took my seat, the corner one, as always. Back when I was 9, I spent a whole afternoon baking cornbread with Grandma Walker for the family potluck. Brought it in a foil-lined basket. Elaine showed up with cupcakes from that place on Broad Street with the glass counter and piped icing that looked like satin. Hers disappeared before dinner. Mine sat untouched, except for one piece Grandpa took and finished. Now, decades later, not much had changed. "Still single?" Mom asked as she passed me the bowl of potato salad. Her voice was casual, but I could already feel the next line coming. "It's just, 30's not young anymore, honey." I took a breath, scooped a modest spoonful, and nodded. "Still working, still saving." "Well," she sighed. "Elaine said Tyler got a 1350 on his SAT. Isn't that wonderful?" I smiled politely. "That's great. He's worked hard." Elaine beamed, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her dress. "We're hoping for Westlake. They love well-rounded kids, and he's got a heart of gold." I took a sip of sweet tea. It tasted more of lemon than sugar, but at least it was cold. Dinner dragged the way it always did. Conversation ricocheting between golf scores, church fundraisers, and who'd gotten what new appliance. I kept quiet. That was my job. Be quiet, be helpful. Later, while scraping remnants of baked beans from someone else's plate into the trash, Mom joined me in the kitchen. Her voice dropped to the same pitch she used when asking for recipes or secrets. "Jenna, sweetheart, the water heater's acting up again. You know that clanging sound it makes when it starts up? Sounds like it's trying to throw itself through the wall." I wiped my hands on a napkin. "How much?" $400, but just until next month, I promise." I didn't say anything, just reached into my purse and handed her the envelope. It was already sealed. She blinked, maybe surprised, maybe not. "Oh," she said softly, folding it into her apron. "Thank you, baby. You always come through." I nodded. I didn't remind her of the last envelope, or the one before that. Out in the yard again, I cleared the tables while everyone else sat back in plastic chairs, their bellies full and their laughter louder. Elaine was recounting Tyler's robotics presentation at school, her voice rising and falling like a trained performer. Dad, sitting beside Uncle Ray, leaned in close and said something with a chuckle. As I picked up the last plate, I heard it. "Jenna's good at keeping quiet. She doesn't ask for much." They both laughed. I didn't stop, just carried the sauce-stained plate to the trash, wiped my fingers on a damp towel, and excused myself without making eye contact. That night, back at my apartment, I opened my laptop. The fan whirred as the screen came to life. I clicked open my spreadsheet. 2021 down payment progress. Cell D47 was already waiting. I typed, "Another setback. Water heater. Gift." Only 21 months left. Then I clicked the Zillow bookmark. The house was still listed. Small porch, craftsman trim, a maple tree in the front yard just beginning to turn. I didn't dream big, just honest. And in that moment, in the silence of my one-bedroom apartment with a leftover Tupperware of potato salad in the fridge, I reminded myself why I said yes, why I swallowed the words I wanted to say. Not for them, for the keys I'd hold one day. They always said I was too quiet, but silence was the only thing they ever listened to. The rain hit the windows in soft, steady rhythms that matched the hum of my old space heater. I was curled on the couch, legs tucked under a throw blanket I'd gotten from Goodwill last fall. The apartment smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and reheated lentils. A candle flickered on the windowsill, more for light than scent. Outside, Charleston was blanketed in cold gray, but inside the stillness was almost warm. My phone buzzed once, then again, voicemail from Mom. "Hey, sweetheart, I hope you're doing well. Listen, it's just, we're trying to get Tyler into a really good prep program. It's college-level stuff. Very competitive. The cost is, well, $1,200. I hate to ask, truly, but this could really change things for him. If you can help, it'd mean so much to all of us." The message ended with a soft sniffle, like always. I set the phone down, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a mug of chamomile. My budget queen mug. Cracked along the handle, but still holding strong, like me, I guess. I stood by the window, watching water streak across the glass, and waited. The second call came just after 8 p.m., Elaine. "Hi, Jenna, just following up on Mom's message. I told her you'd come through. You always do, right? I mean, this is family. And Tyler looks up to you. He's been talking about that robotics kit you got him back in middle school. This program is the next step. You know it's the right thing." There it was again, that calm confidence that she had already decided for me. I didn't answer. I just opened my banking app and stared at the balance. The number looked strong, considering. I'd just hit the halfway mark on my down payment savings. I could feel the weight of every packed lunch, every skip night out, every maybe next year I'd said to vacations, new shoes, even birthday cakes. $1,200 would set me back another 2 months, maybe more. Rent was going up again in March. I held the phone in both hands, thinking. I thought about my 29th birthday, how no one had called, not even Tyler, how Elaine posted a photo of the whole family at a brunch place downtown, captioned, "Nothing like Sundays with my tribe." I wasn't even tagged. My plate wasn't even empty. Finally, I texted, "I'm sorry, I can't." It was the shortest message I'd ever sent to her. No explanation, no guilt, just the truth. I turned off the lamp, crawled into bed, and pulled the covers over my head. I expected my heart to race, but it didn't. Just a slow, strange calm. The next morning, the real blow came. Facebook, of course. Elaine's post sat at the top of my feed like a billboard. So proud of our boy. Some people support family, some just watch. Dozens of likes, a few comments with hearts and applause emojis. One of our cousins wrote, "Always knew you'd raise a champion." I sat on the edge of the bed and typed. I wrote a full response. Paragraphs. I talked about sacrifice, about being invisible, about what it meant to save when no one saw you struggling. I told her she had no right to speak for me. Then I deleted every word. Instead, I opened a drawer and pulled out the old birthday card Grandpa had given me 2 years ago. The envelope was soft from time and creased at the corners. Inside, his handwriting, still neat. "Don't let them tell you where you belong. Love, G." I closed the card and held it to my chest. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I would. I opened my contacts, found Elaine's name, and pressed block. A small box popped up. "Are you sure you want to block this contact?" I was sure. 3 days passed. No calls, no messages. For the first time in years, my phone stayed quiet in a way that wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. Then came the knock at the door. It wasn't a visitor, just the mail carrier already moving down the hall. A stack of envelopes sat in my mailbox, bills mostly. But one stood out, cream-colored, thick, with my full name typed neatly on the front, Jenna Walker. Return address, Joseph Linwood, attorney at law. I closed the door behind me, set the mail on the kitchen table, and stared at the envelope like it might speak first. The last thing Grandpa gave me wasn't wrapped. It was witnessed and notarized. I sat in the waiting room of Linwood and Carter, the kind of place that tried to feel welcoming but couldn't quite mask its purpose. The walls were paneled in dark wood, the carpet too thick for comfort, and the coffee in the corner tasted more like memory than flavor. A brass plaque on the reception desk gleamed with the name Joseph Linwood, Esquire. My hands rested in my lap. I dressed plainly, gray slacks, a navy blouse, flats that had molded to my feet years ago. There was no need for performance today. I wasn't here to impress anyone, just to understand. Ms. Walker. A woman in a charcoal blazer stepped out from behind the glass door. I stood. Yes. Mr. Linwood is ready for you, right this way. The office itself looked like something out of a Southern courtroom drama. Leather-bound books lined the shelves, and there were two mismatched chairs facing a wide walnut desk. Joseph Linwood stood as I entered. Mid-60s, I guessed, thin frame, a tired smile that suggested he'd done this too many times to be surprised by anything. Thank you for coming, Ms. Walker. Of course. Please, he gestured to the chair. Have a seat. I sat, folding my hands again, feeling the corners of my purse dig into my ribs. He adjusted his glasses, then opened a leather folder with deliberate calm. As you're aware, your grandfather, Mr. Calvin Walker, executed a private estate clause shortly before his passing. It was separate from the family's joint will arrangement. He requested that you be notified of this clause in person and alone. I nodded. He mentioned something once, but I didn't think. I stopped. What did it matter what I thought? Joseph leaned back slightly. The clause is in the form of a video statement. Would you like to view it now? I hesitated. Yes, I'm ready. He pressed a small remote. A screen nearly hidden in a paneled corner of the wall lit up. There was no music, no soft fade-in, just Grandpa, sitting in his favorite plaid shirt, the one with the missing button near the cuff. Behind him, I recognized the den. Wood paneling, a faded photo of my grandmother, and a lamp with a crooked shade. He looked straight into the camera. If you're watching this, then I've stepped out for good, he said, his voice dry but steady. And if Jenna's in the room, then I'm where I wanted this to land. I felt something shift in my chest. Jenna, he continued, you've never asked for more than you gave. And I've watched you. Every time you showed up with soup, with silence, with care that didn't need an audience. He shifted slightly in the chair, and I noticed how thin he looked. They say legacy is what you leave behind. I think it's who you trust to carry forward what mattered to you. I want you to have the house, the accounts, the land out in Colleton. I want you to know I saw you, that you didn't go unnoticed. The screen faded to black. I blinked. Once. Twice. Joseph slid a box of tissues across the desk. I shook my head. Thank you, but I'm okay. He nodded respectfully and let the silence sit for a moment. Then he folded his hands. Would you like to notify your family now, Ms. Walker? I can initiate the process, or we can wait until the formal reading. I looked down at my lap, at the faded crease of my pants, at my fingers curled gently into my palms. No, I said. I want them all in the room when they hear it. He didn't question it, just nodded again. I'll make the arrangements. The estate meeting is scheduled for next month. I'll be sending out notices to the full list. I'll be there, I said. On time. Outside, the wind tugged at the leaves, spinning them across the cobblestone sidewalk. The air smelled faintly of crepe myrtles and exhaust. I walked down Broad Street slowly, each step pulling something tighter inside me. Back home, I set my keys on the kitchen counter, kicked off my shoes, and sat at the table. The manila envelope from Joseph lay open beside me. I pulled out the USB stick, walked to my desk drawer, and retrieved a small silver locket. Grandpa had given it to me when I was 15. "For your memories," he'd said. "Not the ones they tell you to keep, but the ones you choose." I popped it open and gently tucked the drive inside. It didn't quite fit, but I made it work. Later that night, I opened the family group chat on my phone. The last message had been months ago, a photo of Elaine's new kitchen renovation with the caption, "Finally got the marble I wanted." I typed, "I'll be attending the estate meeting next month. I hope you'll all be there too." I didn't wait for a reply, just locked the screen and leaned back in the chair, listening to the rain return. If I didn't belong, they should have just said so to my face. Instead, they handed me plastic utensils and a folding chair. The sky was overcast when I pulled into the circular driveway of the Walker estate. Leaves crunched under my tires, oak and magnolia, damp from last night's rain. The house stood still as ever, draped in white trim and pride. Someone had lined the porch railing with faux eucalyptus garlands and white roses. It was supposed to look elegant, I assumed. It just looked forced. I parked near the back, away from the guest spots. Inside, the smell of catered pastries and floral arrangements met me at the door. Aunts, uncles, and cousins hovered in loose clusters. Conversations were quiet, with too many glances and half smiles. When I walked in, heads turned, but no one moved. "Hey," I said softly, nodding once. A few nods came back, but no one stepped forward. I shed my coat, placed it gently on the hall rack, and paused at the entryway. There, framed and centered on the wall, was Grandpa's portrait. The same one that used to sit above his nightstand, his favorite chair in the background, a soft shadow of Grandma just behind him. Now it sat under bright gallery lights like an exhibit. The man who once watched me eat soup beside him now watched over croissants and linen napkins. Elaine floated into view, glass in hand, Rick at her elbow. She wore pearl studs and a soft pink wrap dress, her hair curled just so. She looked like someone who planned to inherit a foundation and give interviews about preserving tradition. "So glad you made it," she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. I nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." She raised her glass. "I just want to say a few words before we begin. Legacy and loyalty, that's what this family is built on. Grandpa believed in both, and it's up to us to carry that forward together." Rick clapped twice. A few cousins followed suit. I stepped into the living room and found a seat near the back, one of the folding chairs. Predictable. In front of the fireplace stood a long coffee table, recently cleared of magazines and remote controls. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small velvet pouch. Inside was the silver locket. I placed it on the table without ceremony and folded my hands. Joseph Linwood arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a leather portfolio and a calm smile. He greeted the room with a slight bow of his head. "Thank you all for coming. As the legal representative of Mr. Calvin Walker's private estate clause, I've been asked to facilitate a short message." The room shuffled. Elaine sat forward. Mom adjusted the hem of her skirt. Dad didn't move. Joseph positioned a small remote in his hand. Behind him, the TV flickered to life, muted blues and grays waiting to settle into a picture. Elaine leaned toward Mom. I didn't hear her full sentence, but I caught enough. "She's just here to make a scene." My fingers brushed the edge of the locket in my coat pocket. I didn't blink. Joseph lifted the remote. "Let's begin." The screen lit up, and there he was. Grandpa, seated in his den, shirt slightly rumpled, the same crooked lamp behind him, his eyes steady, mouth set in a calm line. "If you're watching this," he began, "I've already left the room, but not without leaving something behind." No one moved when he said my name. Even the air forgot how to breathe. On the screen, Grandpa sat still but certain. His words came slow, not from hesitation, but from care. "Legacy isn't about who shines in a room," he said. "It's about who stays when the lights go out, who shows up when no one's watching. That's the person who carries a name forward, not just the money." The room remained silent. The clink of a fork or the rustle of paper might have broken something. but no one dared. Not yet. I've lived long enough to see showmanship, he continued. Seen folks say all the right things in front of others, then walk away before the dishes are cleared. But I've also seen a kind of quiet that builds, 1 hour at a time, in soup dropped off during chemo, in phone calls without requests, in being remembered even when others forget. He looked up, into the camera, but somehow it felt like into the room. Jenna, this isn't about favorites. This is about trust and time and knowing who'll guard the things that matter. Elaine sat bolt upright. Her eyes scanned the room as if daring someone to look her way. Grandpa cleared his throat. I've named Jenna Walker, my sole heir. The house, the Colleton land, the accounts, the belongings, all of it. Not to stir trouble, but to settle it. My mind was clear when I made this choice, and my reasons are plain. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. Silence. Not stunned silence, not respectful silence. Something heavier. The kind that builds up when truth finally cuts through noise. Mom's mouth hung half open. Dad blinked once, then looked away. Rick leaned back slowly, arms crossed. Tyler looked down at his shoes. Elaine was the first to break. This is absurd, she said, standing. Her voice cracked on the second word. She manipulated him. You all saw how sick he was. Elaine, Russell warned quietly. No, I'm serious, she snapped. This video, it could have been recorded on anything, in any condition. When was it filmed? What if he was confused? She was the one visiting him all the time. She could have gotten in his head. Joseph Linwood remained seated, calm, ready. The video was recorded under my supervision, he said. In June of last year, Mr. Walker's physician was present at the start, confirming full cognitive clarity. I have the time-stamped footage, medical clearance, and all documentation here. He opened the folder. The paper inside was thick, clean, precise. Elaine turned to her father. Dad, say something. Russell rubbed his temples. I want to see the will. Joseph handed him a copy. And the other one? Elaine barked. The family one. The shared estate? What does that say? This private clause supersedes the shared document per Mr. Walker's legal right under South Carolina Code. All assets previously held jointly were reassigned in full via this update. She looked ready to scream, but she didn't. Instead, she turned to me. You think this makes you better than us? I stood up slowly. Not rushed, just sure. I didn't come to fight, I said. I came to listen, and Grandpa just spoke. Mom gasped softly. Russell's jaw tightened. Rick said something under his breath that I didn't catch, but I didn't need to. I'd heard enough over the years to fill in the blanks. Elaine's hands clenched the edge of the tablecloth like it might anchor her. You ungrateful little... Don't, I said gently. You've had the spotlight your whole life. I just want the peace he left me. Joseph stood too. Unless there are legal objections, that concludes the meeting. The cousins started to murmur. Chairs shifted. Someone coughed. Uncle Ray hadn't said a word the entire time. As I reached for the velvet pouch on the table, I felt the room shifting around me. No congratulations, no apologies, just movement, like a clock reset to 0. Corinne wiped at her face with a tissue, tears making lines down her makeup. Russell stayed silent. His hands were flat on his knees, his eyes cast down. Rick muttered as I passed, "This isn't over." I didn't answer him. I tucked the pouch into my coat pocket, fastened the button, and walked toward the door. As I stepped past Uncle Ray, he leaned just slightly in my direction. "He was right, you know," he said, barely above a whisper. "You're the one who stayed." I paused, not long, just enough to hold the weight of those words. Then I nodded, opened the front door, and stepped outside into the cool, dry November air. The breeze lifted the hem of my coat and carried the scent of something familiar. Leaves, maybe. Or old wood. Or memory. I didn't look back. I didn't need the house to prove I belonged, but it sure felt good to hold the keys. Early December brought a kind of cold that wasn't heavy, just crisp enough to remind you to slow down. My new home sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, tucked between two brick houses with wreaths on the door and wind chimes that caught the morning sun. It was a modest craftsman with chipped white trim and a screen door that stuck a little. But it was mine. The front steps creaked in the same way Grandpa's had. The ceramic planter beside the door now held rosemary, just like I told him I'd plant one day, and it had started to bloom even in winter. Inside, the air still smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. The walls had gone from dull beige to a soft sea glass green. I'd spent a weekend choosing that color, holding swatches against the light at different times of day. My books were stacked neatly on reclaimed wood shelves. My mugs hung on little hooks near the stove, and my dishes, ones I'd finally bought for myself, rested in quiet rows inside open cabinets. Kent Myers came by on a Saturday morning to help me hang curtain rods. We didn't talk much, but that was Kent's way. He showed up with a drill, a level, and a smile that didn't ask questions. "You saved this?" he asked, holding up the wind chime. I nodded. It was on Grandpa's back porch. We stepped out front and picked a spot beneath the eave. As the chimes settled into place, they gave off a soft, gentle ring, like the beginning of a lullaby. That afternoon, I baked cornbread just because I could. I set the table for one, then for two, when Tyler texted to say he was nearby. He arrived with a half-empty bakery box and a grin that was all his mother's and none of her edges. He handed me the box. Muffins, blueberry, and one that might be banana walnut, but I wouldn't bet on it. I laughed. "You drove all this way to bring me mislabeled pastries?" "Nah," he said. "I came to say thank you." He stood in the entryway looking around, not judging, just taking it in. "I never blamed you," he said. "When everything went down, I knew it wasn't your fault. And I got that scholarship. Full ride, state school, computer science." I felt something loosen in my chest. "I knew you would," I said. "You've got more sense than most of us combined." We sat on the porch steps and split a muffin. The dog, an old hound Grandpa had rescued a year before he passed, curled at my feet, snoring gently. That night, I hosted my first dinner in the new house. Just a few people from the hiking club, one neighbor who brought a pie, and a woman from pottery class who made everyone laugh with stories about her failed attempt at a butter dish. There were no speeches, no expectations, no hidden costs, just full plates and easy conversation. Later, after the dishes were done and the guests had gone, I brewed a cup of peppermint tea and stepped out onto the porch. The wind chime moved with the breeze. Down the street, lights blinked on one by one. The houses glowed warm against the dark, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was standing outside someone else's life. I sat in the old wooden chair I'd sanded myself, pulled the journal from my lap, and opened it to a blank page. The dog shifted beside me. Inside, on the mantel, Grandpa's old watch ticked in steady rhythm. I wrote, "The porch light stays on, but only for those who knock with respect." And with that, I closed the book. The rosemary by my front steps is blooming stronger than I expected this time of year. Maybe that's what happens when something finally grows in its rightful place. Sometimes, the people who see us the least are the ones who believe they own our story. But peace begins the moment we decide to stop asking for space and start building it ourselves. Family isn't always who shares your name. It's who respects your boundaries, even in silence. If this story reminds you of someone you've quietly stood up for or quietly walked away from, I'd love to hear what you've learned too.